can start now.
You said start now.
Start, can I?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about the Alliance Israélite Universelle, AIU, a Jewish organization which is based, it's Paris-based, international Jewish organization. It was established in 1860 to educate and safeguard the human rights of Jews around the world. Its motto in Hebrew is Kol Israel Haverim, or Kia, here we are. Kol Israel Haverim, Haverim meaning friends, Kia in Hebrew. That's the name in Hebrew. In 2010, that is 15 years ago, it celebrated its 150th anniversary with many activities. Stamps were issued in France. Here is a French stamp here, which commemorates the, I'll take this out of the way here, which commemorates the foundation of the Alliance. And there were stamps also in Israel. Let me get rid of all this here. Yeah. In Israel, here is the Israeli stamp here. There were a photo exhibition at the Paris City Hall. There was a limoud. There was a gala dinner attended by the French Prime Minister Nicolas Sarkozy and by the Israeli President Shimon Peres. There was a magnificent celebration at the prestigious Paris Palais des Congrès in Paris. There was a festival, Génération Alliance, which assembled many of those who were members of its schools, both present and past, and they attended a very rich and varied program, which included theatrical performances portraying great moments of the history of the Alliance, enacted by its pupils from France, Israel, and Morocco. There was a large meeting at the Knesset in Jerusalem, which took place to celebrate the action of the Alliance. A documentary film was made, and the title of it I've used for my title. In the beginning was a school. So that's the Alliance Israélite Universelle. Its history. It was founded by the French Jewish lawyer Adolphe Crémieux. I mentioned Adolphe Crémieux before. He was the one that allowed Algerian Jews to receive French citizenship in 1870. Adolphe Crémieux and 6 other Jewish Parisian intellectuals were the founders of the Alliance. And here is the manifesto of the Alliance, yeah, which was included in an appeal to the public in December 1860. And you can read what it says. I am going to talk now about the program of the Alliance. And here is a program. First, to combat ignorance, disease, and poverty amongst Jews by establishing schools. 2, to give support to those Jews suffering persecution because they are Jews. And how to do that? They have to supply funds to help the Jews, and they have to establish contacts with European leaders and their representatives in countries where Jews were persecuted. And 3, they have to encourage publications to expose human rights violations. And the publication was, I will talk about them later, les bulletins de l'Alliance. Right. What are the principles and what is the philosophy behind the foundation of the Alliance? It represented the crystallization of trends that had begun during the French Revolution, liberté, equality, fraternité. Indeed, in 1790, the French revolutionary government gave full citizenship to the Jews from Portugal in France and from Avignon. And then Napoleon Bonaparte came to power. But even before, during his Egyptian campaign against England, Bonaparte made the following proclamation, and I will give it to you here. This is what he said. This great nation, France, is asking you to take what it has conquered for you. Make haste. This moment will not reoccur, perhaps for another 1,000 years. Reclaim your civil rights, your place as a nation among the nations of the world. You have the right to freely worship the Lord according to your religion. If Napoleon had not been defeated by the British at Acre, the Battle of Acre, and if he had not been recalled to Paris, where he became le premier consul, first consul, he would have created a Jewish state in Israel in the 18th century. And on the 16th of August, 1800, he declared, if I were governing a Jewish nation, I would rebuild Solomon's temple. In 1806, Napoleon enacted laws improving the position of all the Jews in the French Empire, and it was a vast empire. These included establishing a representative group elected by the Jewish community, the Grand Sanhedrin. In his conquered countries, he abolished laws restricting Jews to the ghettos. In 1807, he included Judaism among the official religions of France. And later, in 1830, Judaism was placed on an equal footing with Catholicism and Protestantism. So the state now provided funds for synagogues and for the rabbis' salaries. Unfortunately, that was ended in 1905 because France became a secular state. So therefore, France became the first modern nation to emancipate the Jews fully as a result of the French Revolution. And here is what Jules Carvalho says. Once the Jews of France formed a foreign population, now they are devoted citizens, loving and serving their own country. The state of the Jews, exceptional and peculiar to France alone, will become the normal state for Jews among all peoples. It took 40 years for the German Jewries to achieve something similar. And it's only in 1901, the German Jewry, following the example of the Alliance, founded it's called Hilfsverein der Deutschen Juden. I don't know the German anyway. Its aim was likewise to educate mainly Eastern European Jews according to Western standards, to aid pogroms victims, to assist emigration, and provide work in Palestine. The educational system established by the German organization was inspired by that of the Alliance in France. Now, the actions of the British Jews were different from those of the French, and they were mostly expressed by diplomatic or political means. For example, in 1863, 9 or 10 Jews were imprisoned at Safi, Morocco. In fact, I mentioned that when I was in my last lecture, the Jews of Safi. They were imprisoned in Safi, Morocco, on suspicion of having killed a Spanish citizen. 2 others who were innocent had already been executed. Then Sir Moses Montefiore and the Board of Deputies the Board of Deputies of British Jews received a telegram from the Jews of Morocco asking for help. So Sir Moses, supported by the British government, immediately went to Morocco and demanded that the imprisoned Jews be freed, and more generally, that all Jews and Christians should be protected. And Montefiore was successful in both matters. The prisoners were liberated, and the Sultan published an edict granting equal rights of justice to the Jews. 3 points should be made now. 1, from its beginning, the Alliance excluded all political questions. 2, its members' religious opinions always took second place. 3, the Alliance did not wish to disseminate a Jewish variant of French colonialism with its theories of assimilation. It was much more a question of solidarity, of collective responsibility, as it is expressed by the Talmudic principle adopted as a motto by the Alliance, Kol Yisrael Arevim Ze Ba Ze. All Jews bear a responsibility for every other Jew. The emancipation of French Jewry after the French Revolution had allowed French Jewry to become civilized, so they believed that it was simply a matter of time before the less developed Jewish communities would follow them. Just as the Jews of France had obtained full civil rights, the Algerian Jews also, thanks to Crémieux, became French citizens in 1870. Right. Now, what triggered the establishment of the AIU, of the Alliance? Why was it created at this particular time? Well, yeah. Already 20 years before the creation of the Alliance, the need for such an organization had been felt. In 1840, there was the Damascus ritual murder accusations. Father Thomas, a priest, the head of the Franciscan friary in Damascus, was murdered, resulting in an accusation of ritual murder against Jews in that city. 6 Jews were accused of murder to use his blood for ritual purposes. That's called the blood libel. Adolphe Crémieux, Sir Moses Montefiore, and an Orientalist, an eminent Orientalist, Solomon Monk, immediately went to Egypt to intercede with Muhammad Ali, who controlled Syria, and defend the accused. They succeeded, and the Jewish prisoners were freed. This event emphasized the need for a central organization to defend oppressed Jews anywhere in the world. And then you have the Mortara affair. In 1858, 2 years before the foundation of the Alliance, a crime in the state of the Pope aroused worldwide indignation. One fine morning, the family Mortara in Bologna was living happily when some Pope's soldiers came and forcibly took the young child, Edgar, 11-year-old. They took him from his Jewish parents with the firm support of the Pope, and they brought him as a Catholic, put him up as a Catholic. The parents never saw him again. Why? What happened? This was because, allegedly, he had received an emergency baptism at a young age by a Catholic domestic servant when he was suffering from some very severe childhood illness, and he was near death. So the domestic thought that poor chap would go straight to hell if he were not baptized. So she had him baptized secretly. And then, full of sorrow and embarrassment, she confessed. She went to confession and she confessed to a priest. And the priest decided a Christian child cannot be brought up by Jewish parents. The French liberal press was outraged. Even the Emperor Napoleon III in France intervened, but without success. And partly as a result of this, the Alliance Israélite Universelle came into existence 2 years later to defend Jewish interests everywhere. And third, also, since let me see if I've got it. Yeah, I should have put this. You can read it. His view of the emancipation of French Jews. Okay. There is a third reason for the creation of the Alliance. I mentioned before that France had colonized Algeria in 1830. And so French Jewry came into contact with Jewish communities in North Africa and became aware of the situation of the dhimmi. And I mentioned what a dhimmi was, a second-class subject, and there was discrimination, there was persecution, there were murders, and the Jewish community of France came into contact with heard of what was happening. So therefore they wanted to come to the help of the Algerian and Moroccan Jews, and that was the Alliance was created. But the Alliance had problems, and there were some struggles. Why? One, the Alliance encountered opposition from Jewish writers and rabbis who tried to prevent the foundation of the society. It was thought that the Alliance work would lead directly to a loosening of religious ties and to assimilation of some of its graduates. So the Alliance was at times bitterly opposed by Orthodox religious groups, which accused it of alienating its pupils from their Jewish roots. At the Alliance 150th anniversary celebration in 2010, the historian Lucien Guests referred to this and said the following: in its enthusiasm for all things French and European, for the new world ahead, it was claimed that the Alliance failed to foster appreciation of the old, that it diminished respect for religion and opened a gulf between secularly educated children and their more pious parents. Of course, the Alliance schools, with their vocational training, with the education of girls and women, and with their initial hostility to Zionism, were very different from the traditional religious schools of the poverty-stricken Jewish areas of North Africa and the Middle East. Also, there was sometimes, that's number two, there was sometimes antagonism between the Alliance's Paris-trained teachers and the traditional rabbis of the area in which it operated. But the Alliance had always intended its schools to foster Judaism. Also, the study of Hebrew, Judaism, Jewish history was an important part of its curriculum, as we shall see later, both at the local level and also at its teacher training colleges in Paris. Now, also, in the eyes of anti-Semites, the Alliance embodied the Jewish multinational octopus which strangled civilization. The notorious and violently anti-Semitic tract, The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, was created in part to present a distorted image of the Alliance. Finally, the Alliance effectively promoted French culture, and so the French government strongly supported its work. The Alliance was accused of playing the diplomatic game of France and given a colonial role, which was not good. The French character of Alliance education may have contributed to its reduced influence in some countries, for it clashed with nationalist spirit in many countries. Some clashes also continued after the independence of the French colonies and protectorates after the Second World War. Today, there is very little Jewish or other criticism about the Alliance and its unparalleled contributions to Jewish education and philanthropy. Now, I will talk briefly about the Alliance organization and finance, and also the library. The Alliance has had a typically French strong central structure. It's all directed by the Paris Committee, the Central Committee in Paris. And the branch committees were firmly controlled by the Paris Committee, especially in the finances, for the funds were transferred to the headquarters in Paris. Now, the finances. For all its life, the Alliance has depended on donations as a principal source of income. However, there had been support from the French government, as we will see in Morocco, and after World War II, the Alliance schools also received subsidies from the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee and other Jewish charitable organizations. Then there were donations. A famous one is the Baron Maurice de Hirsch, a businessman and philanthropist who donated altogether 18 million sterling pounds between 1874 and 1809 to improve the position of the Jews in the Turkish Empire in Greece, Bulgaria, Serbia, Romania. 18 million sterling pounds would be today 300 million pounds, I suppose. Now, there is a library at the Alliance. In 1868, the Alliance received a gift of 10,000 gold francs from Benjamin Rothschild. He was a Danish diamond merchant, not related to the German financial dynasty. And he gave that for the foundation of a library. This resulted in a valuable library on Jewish subjects at the Alliance offices in Paris. And in September 1889, the Alliance inaugurated a new library, which became the largest Jewish library in Europe, possessing over 130,000 items at the time, more now. The Alliance Library now also houses manuscripts, specialized archives on Jewish medicine, on Jewish education, and regularly mounts temporary exhibition. And some of the bulletins, which we'll talk about later, are there also. Indeed, the publication, the Bulletin of the Alliance was the Alliance official organ, published in Paris between 1860 and 1913, and it stopped during the First World War to start again after the First World War. It covered in detail most of the important events that concern the Jewish community. For example, the mass immigration from Russia during the 1880s in the Balkan War. They revealed the condition of some Jewish communities and also gave much detail on their daily lives. But I will talk about the bulletin much later. Teachers and school principals had to spend regular detailed reports to send the regular detailed reports to the Central Committee about their schools, the pupils' progress, curricula and specific problems with teachers and parents. The reports also described the general condition of their local Jewish communities and gave demographic and professional profiles of the communities, their habits, their beliefs, ways of life, relationships with local authorities, and even certain local climatic and agricultural conditions. The Alliance employees who sent these reports were mostly members of the local Jewish communities, and so they were familiar with the local languages, customs, and political conditions. This information about the various Jewish communities was essential for the Alliance to function effectively. Without concrete knowledge of the detailed situations in these communities, it was difficult to demand the abolition of legal discrimination. So the Alliance obtained much valuable information about communities. Knowing the number of Jewish pupils in each of them was also essential so that appropriate funding and numbers of school and teachers could be provided. Information about the parents, their incomes, occupations, etc., was also required to decide what funds could be raised locally and how much was needed from the Alliance. So now, for the first time since the destruction of the Second Temple, centers of information were established documenting Jewish life throughout the entire world. Now I will go very quickly over the Alliance activities in Europe. It was there to improve the legal status of the Jews in the countries like Serbia, Romania, Russia. It also had wanted to assist the Jewish immigrants after pogroms and provide relief for them, but that was all in Europe. So I'm not so interested in what they did in Europe. What happened to the Alliance during the Second World War? All branches of the Alliance's activities during the war were isolated from the head office. The head office left Paris for the non-occupied, for the free zone of France. The Free French government supported the Alliance and de Gaulle, and after the war, General de Gaulle appointed René Cassin as the head of the Alliance. Now, René Cassin, you can see him on the right of de Gaulle, of the General de Gaulle here. This is during, in 1941, 1 minute of silence in memory of Nantes hostages murdered by the Nazis. René Cassin is very famous. He obtained the Nobel Peace Prize. He was the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize in 1968 because he was the architect of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And that's why he got the Nobel Prize. And here we have a school in Jerusalem named after him here. It's called the René Cassin High School in Jerusalem, which was opened in 1974. Now, when the Nazis were in Paris, they raided the edifice or the buildings of the Alliance, and they stole everything that was there. The archives, the books, the manuscripts, they stole everything, and everything went to Berlin. And in 1945, after the war, at the end of the war, all this went to Russia. And it took years for Russia to send little by little the archives of the ARU. And this is what they received in December 2000. But it took a long time to little by little return what they had been stolen. Now, I am going to talk now about the education that was given by the Alliance Israélite Universelle, because after all, this was the main mission. That was their mission, to educate, to advance, to civilize the Jews of the Mediterranean by providing French education and culture. The Alliance built 210 schools in 16 countries, mostly around the Mediterranean basin. Since its inception, it educated more than 1 million Jewish pupils. Now, I'll talk about the Alliance in Morocco. In Morocco, there were 83 Alliance schools, and in 1956, there were 33,000 students educated by the Alliance, 33,000 in 1956. The first school in Morocco was created in Tétouan in 1862, just 2 years after the creation of the Alliance. And there were many, many, many other schools. In fact, as I said, 83. And in that map, you can hardly see the name. There were schools in Mogador, Fez, Tanger, Casablanca, etc., etc. Many, many schools in Morocco. In 1928, the French protectorate in Morocco amicably agreed with the Alliance, that is the government of Morocco, amicably agreed with the Alliance that its schools would become the responsibility of the public education department. So now the Alliance schools network became part of the protectorate's social and educational activities. The French Foreign Office and its Moroccan Protectorate administration often cooperated with the Alliance, supplying financial and other support for its schools, because the French needed educated personnel. So they employed bilingual Alliance-educated Jews to act as translators and junior administrators in post offices, municipal offices, etc., for dealing with the Arab population. However, the Alliance did not take its pupils all the way to the baccalaureate. In this way, it was different from the French lycée. They stopped at the age, well, depend, but they about 14, 15, 16. And unlike the French lycée, where you could sit for the baccalaureate, which allowed you to enter any university in Algeria and in France. But the Alliance did not take its children or its pupils all the way to the baccalaureate. The Alliance social relief was enormous, as well as its educational activities. They improved the living condition of the pupils from the Melach. I told you I mentioned last time what a Melach was. That was a ghetto, the Jewish quarters. Yeah. In Casablanca, the Alliance established a school for the blind, mainly suffers from trachoma, and as well as an institute for the deaf and dumb, in collaboration with the OART and the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee. They found, I saw a little film about what happened in Morocco in the Melach when the teachers arrived. The children didn't know how to sit at a table. They had never sat on a chair, never written on a table. They had spent studying at the cheder, they had been sitting on the ground. They had never been taken out for gymnastics or for exercise. There was never a break in the hours of study in the cheder. The Alliance provided food for the children, perhaps sometimes the only meal they had in that day. The Alliance provided also clothes for the children, very, very poor. So Alliance did a lot in Morocco. But after the independence of Morocco in 1957, the pupil numbers fell steadily from 30,000 in 59 to about 13,000 something in 63. But Morocco and Tunisia, in Morocco and Tunisia, some Jews remained, as we can see. There are still Jews in Morocco and Tunisia. Few viable communities still today. Now, I will show now schools. I don't have pictures of schools, of more schools in Morocco, but I'll show you other pictures. Oh, I have not. This is a school in Tétouan, the first school that the Alliance built in 1862. And here is here schools in Morocco. And here we have in Rabat, Morocco, and at the back you have the teacher, Madame Conqui, and that was recent, 57, 58. Here, this is a school, it must be the Maimonides school in Casablanca. And they taught, as we'll see later, the Alliance taught also the local language. And here you have the same text in French, Arabic, and Hebrew. That's all I have from schools in Morocco, but I have pictures of a school in other towns, other parts of the North African, around the basin, Mediterranean basin. This is the education of Jewish girls in Tunis, 1882. Here we have a girls' school in Cairo, 1922. Here you have a boys' school in Aleppo, Syria. Yeah, as I said, the Alliance encouraged getting out. And here you have scouts in uniform holding flags bearing the name of the Alliance Schools of Damascus, Syria. Yeah, as I said, they encourage gymnastics and athleticism. This is in Damascus, Syria. Here are all the schools in the Balkan and Western Turkey. Very, very bad picture, but you have an idea of how many there were. Altogether, I said the Alliance built 216 schools. Here is the Talmud Torah in Turkey. It's a beautiful school, and you can imagine that some of the money of the Baron de Hirsch came to building that lovely big school here. We have another lovely school later. This is a school for girls in Baghdad, must have been quite early on, perhaps the end of the 19th century. The Alliance offered a medical examination. This is an eye examination at this school in Baghdad, 1924. Yeah, they taught needlework in schools. This is the Laura Kadouri, the famous Kadouri who sadly financed that school. Here, it's another examination at the Laura Kadouri school. Yeah, here we are. Yeah. This is a terrible photograph, but you can see there are hundreds and hundreds of pupils there at Basra in Iraq. That's 1911. And this is a beautiful school, another beautiful school in Kermanshah in Iran. It's a lovely building, and obviously the Baron de Hirsch money went towards it. Isfahan in Iran, and here also in Iran, 1913. One wonders, some here, obviously, there may be the teachers, but they're quite older children here. They must have been final years, or even in their 20s, they came to the school. So that was all schools in Iran, Iraq, Palestine, Egypt, etc. Now I'm going to talk about what the Alliance did in Palestine. In 1870, a founding member of the Alliance called Charles Netter obtained some land in Palestine from the Ottoman Empire as a gift, and he opened the Mikveh Israel Agricultural School. Here it is. Mikveh Israel Agricultural School. It was the first of a network of Jewish schools in Palestine, all long before the establishment of the State of Israel. That was in 1870. It was the first step towards paving the way for the state. So that's the Mikveh Agricultural College. Here are the staff. This is a staff of the Mikveh Agricultural School. And here is Ben Gurion at the centennial exhibition of the Alliance Mikveh Agricultural College in 1970. Yeah. As I said, Alliance encouraged gymnastics and outdoors activities. That's gymnastic class in Jaffa, 1922. Here, medical care at the AIU in Jaffa also for kids. There must have been elementary or preschool children. Yes, as I said, they distributed in Morocco, they gave food. Here meals, but here they have free milk given in 1939, free milk at a girls' school. Yeah. The Alliance created a deaf and dumb school in Jerusalem in 1934. And yeah, so that's Alliance School today. Alliance still continues to operate many schools and educational programs in Israel. It has had to relinquish the French orientation of some of its schools today. Its elementary schools were closed down or taken over by the Israeli state education system, but they continue to teach French as a first foreign language. So the Alliance concentrated on secondary education, and they opened schools in Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and Haifa. Most recently, the French-Israeli High School was established in 2007 as a joint initiative of the Israeli and the Alliance. The best known schools of long-standing include the Alliance High School in Tel Aviv, in Haifa, and the René Cassin, which I showed before, Conservative High School in Jerusalem. And as I said, the network also includes a school for the deaf, and I saw that before. And here it was, I think, school for the deaf in Jerusalem for both Jews and Muslims and Arabs. And they may have also some various mental and physical disabilities. The Mikveh Israel Youth Village operates both as a state high school and a state religious high school specializing in science and biotechnology. Now, in order to teach, the Alliance had to train the teachers. So I'm now going to talk about the teachers at the Alliance. It trained its teachers. To train its teachers, it established l'École Normale Israélite Orientale, ENIO, École Normale, it's a training college, ENIO, created in Paris in 1867. Here is the building at the end of the 19th century. There were 4 men teachers. And then in 1872, women also were being taught. And in 3 schools, l'École Bischofsheim, a vocational school, and the private school of Madame Veil-Kahn and Madame Isaac. The 3 schools provided education for the girls with a rigorous education. Yeah. What was taught? What was it trained to teach? French was a language of instruction in all the Alliance's schools. The curriculum included the Bible and Jewish history, religious instruction, Hebrew, French, arithmetic, local and world geography, local and world history, physical and natural sciences, and the local language. I showed you in Casablanca, there was Arabic on the board. And for that, this very often, or most of the time, employed the locals in order to teach local language. And sometimes needlework for girls or tailoring, depends which schools it was. In the earliest days, the Alliance expected its teachers to come from France, but few French Jews were willing to live in the villages and towns of North Africa and the Middle East. So the Alliance decided to send the brightest of its local pupils to study in Paris. Those that had achieved the best marks were sent to Paris for 4 years. At first, only males were trained. And after 4 years with French teaching degrees and qualification in Hebrew and Jewish history, they returned to educate the children of their country. But then women also were sent to Paris to be trained. And some of the teachers here, one of them, have you heard of Emmanuel Levinas, is the third from the left on the second row, the famous philosopher, Emmanuel Levinas. He taught at the Alliance for 40 years. Apart from his philosophy, he also was a teacher. Here are the student teachers at the Pension Isaac, Madame Isaac, in the training college. And here, also in Versailles, a training college. And here they are men, but they are rehearsing for a play by Labiche, a famous writer, a funny comedian writer. They are rehearsing for the play. And here you have Jewish teachers in monastir in Tunisia. The academic demands on these Orientals were very heavy because the French teachers had been living in France, so it was easier, but they all took the same final official written and oral exams at the Hôtel de Ville. Not only the French one, but the Orientals, in order to start teaching. The new teacher's first assignment, normally as an assistant, was often very difficult. And I will mention one of the women there, Lucy Obadia. She was 21-year-old and she was born in Salonika, Greece, and she came to study in Paris. She was very bright and she was apparently an excellent teacher. She was sent to Alexandria in 1899, but she found herself living, and I've read some in a bulletin, I've read some of her texts. She found herself living in a tiny room with inadequate furniture. There was no cupboard. There was just a nail on the door where she could hang her clothes. The school where she was teaching was very dirty, unhygienic, and she said deplorable conditions, and there was a lack of supplies and a problematic student body. Each time a teacher was transferred, sometimes after only a few years, and not always to a location that she wanted. For example, Lucy Ovadia was sent to Rhodes and subsequently to nearby Bursa. Bursa is in Turkey. And she again had to learn another language and the customs of the students, as well as finding satisfactory living condition for herself and a growing family. She did marry eventually in Bursa. She married the principal of the school. Initially, the Alliance did not allow its women teachers to marry, but by 1910, married women teachers in the Alliance schools were a fait accompli, and large families was the norms. Predictably, they often married their male counterparts. As I said, Lucie Obadia married Léon Chemar, a principal of the school in Versailles. Of the 194 women teachers who received degrees in Paris before 1935, 127 were married. The women teachers of the Alliance were a very diverse group. In that class with Lucie Obadia, you had girls from Adrianople, from Tangiers, from Monastir, from Alsace, from Aleppo, from Damascus, from Beirut, Salonika. So it's a quite varied group of pupils there. But the girls, the women, went very much beyond the Alliance's far more limited intentions. Some teachers were appalled by the practice of child marriage, and they were determined to eradicate it. And I have mentioned in my previous talks that in North Africa, girls at the age of 3 and a day or a week were promised in marriage by the father to someone else. And by the time they were 12, they were married. So the women teachers were completely against that. And they wanted to convince the mothers to give priority to their daughters' education over finding a suitable husband. In fact, there were some pioneer feminists amongst them. They thought that women and girls deserved the opportunity for a career other than marriage. So at first, the training school, ENYO, only trained its future teachers and principals, but in 1960, its syllabus was broadened. Students were then prepared for additional careers, but always including teaching. And by 1968, it had 120 pupils. It stopped teaching training in 1970 and became now a lycée, Alliance Lycée, until 1999. The Alliance Israélite today,
Okay.
there are now 18 Alliance schools which teach at secondary level all the way to the baccalaureate. There are 4 in France, and I will show you here one of the schools in Montsafra in Paris. And so 4 in France, 8 in Israel, 4 in Morocco, and 1 in Switzerland and 1 in Canada. All the ARU schools follow the regulations and the national secondary programs of the nations where they are located. They prepare pupils for university entry. Another crucial ARU school policy is not to promote any specific type of religious Judaism. Schools following Orthodox and other traditions are supported. In Morocco, there are now 4 schools, l'École Narcisse Levin, École Maïmonide, and l'École Normale Hébraïque in Casablanca. The pupils study for the baccalaureate. Muslims now comprise about half of the pupils in the Alliance's Moroccan schools. They are the only schools in the Arab world, to my knowledge, where Jewish and Muslim children are taught sitting side by side in a Jewish school. The most famous alumnus of the Lycée Maïmonide in Casablanca is a very well-known Moroccan French cinema actor. I know him and I've seen him many times, Gad El Mali. While he was interviewed for the film, at the beginning was a school, a film which was made for the 150th anniversary of the Alliance, he recalled his experience as a pupil and he said, in 1980, the student body included a good number of Muslim Moroccans. The atmosphere was very friendly amongst the Jewish and Muslim pupils and the teachers, and it was not unusual to have a Jewish pupil copying the answers to a Hebrew test from his Muslim neighbor. Now, to conclude, the Alliance Israélite Universelle, 165-year-old existence, arose from French Jewish solidarity with their less fortunate fellow Jews suffering discrimination, persecution, and enforced poverty in Muslim countries and elsewhere. It was the world's first supranational Jewish body, working for Jews' human rights in many lands. The Alliance's 2 principal activities were 1, political activity to serve persecuted Jews, 2, education to teach the French language and culture together with a strong emphasis on Hebrew and the Jewish heritage. An important Alliance objective everywhere is to encourage the Jewish intercommunity activity, especially between religious and secular youth. So in all its varied activities, the Alliance was a pioneer, and today its contributions to Jewish education and philanthropy are less widely acknowledged in the English-speaking world than they merit. And thank you very much for your attention. Yeah? Right.
Okay.
Finished.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Wenchenko. Any questions or comments from
Omer?
anybody? You've got 7 minutes.
Yes.
It was most
Yeah.
interesting, most interesting. I just wanted to say, when you talk about Napoleon in he had the war, the battle at Akko and so on. I think everybody here knows this. They say that he went to Jerusalem and he saw people standing at the wall and crying. And he said, what's happening? He said, they're crying for the temple, and which was destroyed 2,000 years ago. And he said, if a people can still cry for a temple that they lost 2,000 years ago, they should own the country. It should be their country. I've heard that quotation many a time.
Thank you.
It's quite interesting that. Yeah, but it was so interesting. But I'm still surprised that these Alliance schools exist today still.
Yeah. Well, they are affiliated. You see, for something like Herzliya, you see, they receive money from the Alliance and they teach exactly what is taught in a lycée in other schools, but they teach Hebrew, Jewish studies, biblical studies, and so on. Yeah.
So they do science, mathematics, all of that. They've still
Oh,
got
yeah,
it
yeah,
as
yeah,
well.
yeah. Absolutely, everything, just like other schools. But they teach Hebrew, the Bible,
In
religious
addition.
studies, and so on. And they
Yes.
get some money from the Alliance. Yeah.
I see. Wow, that's quite interesting.
Right.
So it started off originally to help the very poor, the uneducated, and so on. When I was in Morocco, they pointed out a few places in the hills where Jews used to live. Like you could see primitive.
Law medicine.
Yeah. Well, not in the school, at the university, but not at the school.
To follow with
Oh yeah,
medicine.
yeah.
Go to the
Yeah, they
confession.
prepare. No, they prepare. They follow the education system of the country. In France, they have baccalaureate. In Switzerland or in other Morocco, whatever. Well, I think a baccalaureate, because it's very, very much like French education in Morocco today. But what's important is that you have Muslims. They want to study French because it opens the doors to many of them to France, you see.
Yes. And you say that the school in Jerusalem still exists?
Well, yes, according to my research. Yeah.
Oh, very interesting.
It still exists. It's called, I don't know what they call it. Yeah, in Jerusalem. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I mentioned the names in Jerusalem. Yeah.
Yes, you did.
Yes,
I was just wondering if they still exist today.
So thank you very much, Professor Winchek. And I think we'll have one more before the High Days. It'll be the 10th of September, so 2 weeks' time. And Professor Winchek is going to talk about Kahina, a Berber queen, warrior queen. So it should be
Kahina, the Kahina.
Yeah, Kahina, the Berber warrior queen.
Like Cohen.
Yeah. So thank you for tonight, and we wish you good night, all of you.
Thank you for
Take
being
care.
here.
And remember, 2 weeks' time, so the 10th of September will be the last one before the Holy Days, and we'll continue with our series after the Holy Days are over.
Thank you very much.
For being here.
Thank you for organizing. Annie, thank you so much.
Merci, grand-mère.
Merci, grand-mère.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup.
How do I get out? I don't know how to get out.
I'll close off. Bye-bye.
Bye.